Philippines, where until very recently I was living. I lived here for 5 years. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much. So, these are the outlines of my presentation. You know, HIV is a universe, and within this universe you have several galaxies. So I'm trying to focus a little bit, because it's too big for this talk. I will talk about HIV prevention in general and HIV vaccines very briefly. One of the efficacy trials that shows give us some hope that a vaccine is possible. And I will focus on the HIV epidemiological data in Asia and some Asia country-specific data in men having sex with men and the implications for HIV vaccine development. So toward the HIV/AIDS pandemic, it has become a consensus of the scientific and public health community that non-vaccine prevention modalities and an HIV vaccine, effective HIV vaccine, would be needed to reach an AIDS-free generation. Since the discovery of the HIV in 1983 by François Grace-Hennessy and Luc Montagnier, both Nobel Prize in the Pasteur Institute. Soon after that, there were many prophets who said the vaccine would be available within the next 3 years, 1 year, etc. And we are 35 years later and we still don't have a vaccine. So what have we learned over these past years is the discovery of the virus. We learned that there are proven methods of partially effective prevention, like medical male circumcision, pre-exposure prophylaxis, treatment as prevention. And HIV therapy is amazingly effective, but adherence is essential, and all HIV-positive people should be offered therapy as soon as diagnosed. And I think this is what I heard this morning in the talk. New advances in prevention treatment are needed to help end the epidemic, and to make further progress we must integrate biomedical with behavioral and social science research. You have all heard about pre-exposure prophylaxis. There are some promising avenues, and there are also some pitfalls. PrEP, as defined as a daily pill containing FTC and TDF, is the US FDA approved biomedical prevention modality that we call PrEP. It's amazingly effective if the PrEP user adheres to PrEP. So this is not a magic bullet. It must be delivered in the context of a comprehensive prevention package, and it needs to address the access and adherence issues. So there are new generations of PrEP agents under evaluation. For example, injectable PrEP that may circumvent the issue of adherence, and long-acting. They are long-acting, easier to use, safer, and more accessible to lower cost. So let's talk about, I will put the entire slide to come, and it's easier like this. The HIV vaccine trials. There have been a flurry of HIV vaccine trials over the past, I would say now, 35 years. The first clinical trial started in the end of the 80s. And several conceptual approaches were tested. And here, the cascade of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, here you have the summary of the efficacy trials that have been conducted so far, and for which we have the results. The first clinical trials that were tested were a simple envelope protein of the virus, and they showed no efficacy. They were tested in Thailand and the US in different high-risk groups. They showed no efficacy. And the goal of this protein was to induce neutralizing antibodies, until we discovered that the neutralizing antibodies were not neutralizing the circulating strains. Then people say, well, we need to have a concept that is inducing, since the virus is integrating the DNA of the human genome, we need to identify cells that are expressing at the surface the virus, part of the virus, and to kill these cells. So the concept was invented that we call prime boost, where you prime the immune system with a recombinant vector or DNA to induce cell-mediated immune responses, and you boost with a soluble protein with an adjuvant. What we call the prime boost strategy. So there have been different vectors tested, different proteins in combination or alone, and that led to a first efficacy trial called the STEP trial, and it was conducted in North and South America, but also Australia, Caribbean, in high-risk groups, and another one that was similar, but conducted in South Africa in heterosexual men and women. So interestingly, they were in phase 2 trials. They were able to induce cell-mediated immune response of good magnitude, but that were unable to lower the viral load for those who were infected. And they showed no efficacy. Not only they showed no efficacy, but that's an interesting point. Both trials showed that those who were infected is complex. There was a tendency to be more susceptible to HIV. So it's a lesson learned that what happened in the baby vaccine trial also happened in HIV is some product. The second lesson learned is that what is important is to conduct good clinical trials to have reliable conclusions wherever they are. So then came another prime boost concept using a recombinant pox virus that is called Ovax, it's a canary pox, and boosted by a protein from subtype A and subtype B and subtype E. And this clinical trial was conducted in Thailand. This was a community trial. It showed 31% efficacy. So I will come back on that. And then you had another clinical trial conducted in the US with another prime boost using DNA prime and 5 boost, so a DNA L vector, and that showed also no efficacy. So the light came, and I think Dr. Kim has a huge responsibility in this. Thank you. The vaccine with Olvac prime and X-Vax boost showed an efficacy. It was released in the AIDS conference in Paris in 2009. There were 4 injections of canary pox and 2 injections of protein. And there was a 3-year follow-up every 6 months. Here is a curve that shows that the vaccine infections were less in the vaccine group compared to the placebo infection, and then the efficacy was 31.2%. So that was a real breakthrough, because after all these years and all these failures of clinical trials, at least we have something that shows some efficacy against. So the end point was prevention of HIV infection. It's very important to, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that, but prevention of HIV infection. There was some post-hoc analysis that showed that actually the vaccine efficacy was 60% if you looked at only 1 year instead of 2.5 years later. So that means that there was probably some mechanism that was the background for this, the support for this efficacy, and that the antibodies probably were vanishing over time, explaining why the efficacy may vanish. So that led to another important discovery. Since we had for the first time, if you want to study correlates of protection, you must have something that protects. If you don't have protection, you cannot study. So we had the opportunity in this case to have a protection, not 30%, 31%, and for a subset of participants, the blood was collected, so we were able to study, and it triggered a massive, huge undertaking, a multi-country, multi-team series of investigations of sophisticated assays in laboratories, and that led to identification of what we call immune correlates of risk, not immune correlates of protection. And these immune correlates were identified mostly as IgG antibodies against the V1, V2 region of the HIV-1 envelope protein, was associated with reduced infection. And the second important finding was that non-neutralizing antibodies mediated ADCC activity. So we're not talking about neutralizing antibodies here, but about non-neutralizing antibodies. And the IgA antibodies that were also induced correlated with increased infection. So it led again to a swarm of more intense analysis, extremely complex. I don't want to go through it. But that trying to address different facets of the immune correlates of risk in this clinical trial. I think this is not over, but I would refer to some recent publications like Thomas Kopkin, Thomas Hans, and Excler, etc., to review these detailed explanations. So, once you have that, what do you do? The vaccine was not licensed because the threshold to license the vaccine, to trigger licensure at the time, was 50% efficacy. That was not reached. So the goal is to do more, to do better, to do longer. To increase the strength, the breadth, and the durability of the immune responses. And how, which is a tricky issue. Using new proteins, conformational proteins, or there are just improved linear proteins, potent adjuvants, more potent adjuvants. In this clinical trial, we used Alan to use additional boost, test the value of additional boost, to test longer intervals and new vectors. So this led to a flurry of clinical trials in Thailand that were a follow-up of the clinical trial, the phase 3 trial, where these elements like additional boost and different intervals were tested. There is one paper out, but there are some others to come, because the analysis is very complex, it's not finished. The clinical trial in Thailand also triggered interest to say, okay, this was conducted in a community, and the risk was the community risk, so there was no stratification by risk group. So the question was, if we go to a country where there is a high risk in heterosexual population, like South Africa, would the same regimen work? And the vaccine was tested first for safety and immunogenicity in South Africa and showed basically the same patterns. And a similar prime boost regimen that was using the same vector but with subtype C genes instead of subtype E and B genes, is used in South Africa. And the protein to boost is slightly different with an adjuvant called MF59. So this trial showed lower V1, V2 antibody responses than the RB144 and limited cross-reactions with other HIV subtypes, which is a bit disappointing. Nevertheless, they decided, the scientific committee in the South African scientists decided to go ahead and to implement a phase 2B trial that is ongoing in heterosexual populations with these products. So we are eagerly awaiting, and maybe we will have another good surprise, hopefully, for the populations. So what I said, the overall strategy from starting from RB144, which was the only strategy that showed efficacy, it is now to pursue the effort in Thailand in high-risk men having sex with men. And I will come back on the epidemiology to say why, to explain why. And in South Africa on high-risk heterosexual. And there will be also expansion of these trials in the US and Europe, in Southeast Asia, and in South Africa more globally. So this is a global. So for Asia, what is the strategy now globally? The initial follow-up clinical development strategy with the RB144 regimen was to conduct a phase 2B trial in men having sex with men in Thailand. That was the first. That was the logical step. However, for various reasons, the strategy did not materialize. The clinical trial data suggests that the GP120, one of the GP120 that was used in the RB144, which we call R8244 delta 11, seem to have special characteristics that are unmatched by other analogs. If you want explanation, I would be happy, but it's a bit complex and long. So another primary strategy in clinical trials is using two viral vectors, also expressing HIV mosaic antigens using two different vectors, L26 and modified oxygen-CAR, which is a attenuated vaccine. So this strategy has shown some interesting efficacy in macaques using the SIV model, and is should enter soon into efficacy trial in Thailand, but also will be multi-country, multi-continent clinical trial. So all these elements trigger the renewed interest of donors and pharma industry to consider a phase 2B trial in MS and in Asia, where HIV incidence remains high in several countries. So I'll talk a little bit about the epidemiological patterns of HIV infections. This is a bit schematic, but in Africa, most of the transmission is heterosexual, and although now there is an unveiled and expanding MSM transmission epidemic that comes to light, and of course there is still mother-to-child transmission, unfortunately. In Asia, there is of course still heterosexual, but mostly men having sex with men, and this epidemic is expanding. There was also decreasing in epidemic in heavy drug users, and it's now the incidences are very low. To give you an example, the RB144 trial in Thailand was conducted in a community. The incidence in this community was below 1%. And so when you want to calculate the sample size based on the lower bound of your confidence interval of your incidence, it was, like I remember, 22.2.3. So we ended up with a clinical trial sample size of 16,000 people. This is enormous. This is extremely expensive. So in many communities, that were at risk in the past. If you refer to the mid-90s, for example, in Thailand, you had military constraints, military recruits, female sex workers, IV drug users, all of these populations. This is a great success for Thailand. The HIV incidence has dropped dramatically due to behavioral interventions, and of course the use of treatment. So this is, which means that the clinical trials in these populations were no longer possible. That's why people said, okay, what are the other populations that are still at high risk with high incidence that make a efficacy trial feasible? So if you look at the epidemic in HIV/AIDS in Asia and the Pacific, there are 5.1 million people living with HIV/AIDS, 1.8 million women living with HIV, and 510,000 young people living with HIV. 270,000 new infections per year, and 170,000 AIDS-related deaths. These are the latest UNAIDS data. So globally, the HIV incidence has decreased by 35% since 2000, which is good news, and AIDS-related deaths dropped by 42% since 2004. New infections declined in some countries in the region, like in India, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, but increased in others like Pakistan, Philippines, and Indonesia. And this is represented on this graph. The majority of the estimated new HIV infections of people living with HIV are in China, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar. HIV is concentrated among key populations: MSM, transgender women, female sex workers, and people who inject drugs. So these are this is the profile. And although this slide is 2004, you can probably forget the percentages, but the proportions are the same. Again, the majority is represented by men having sex with men and added to transgender people. The other portions are, of course, important, but you can say that you can see that this is where you still have opportunity to recruit compared to the general population in South and Southeast Asia. Infections among female sex workers have slowed down, but remain important contributors to HIV transmission in the region. And there are limited data that are available about HIV epidemics in transgender people. There are more and more work, and it comes to light as well. But they are estimated to be 9 to 9.5 million in the region, and the small-scale research is mostly limited to transgender women who have sex with men. So in several cities, HIV prevalence in these groups was substantially higher than in the general population of reproductive age, and even higher than in MSM. Important to underscore is that these key risk populations are also those who are the mostly underserved by HIV prevention programs because they are less accessible. For example, throughout Asia, less than 60% of MSM and female sex workers know where to get tested for HIV and have received condoms through distribution programs. So this is an important negative aspect of HIV prevention. Condom promotion programs are not reaching men at a sufficient high level, and the rates of condom use at last sex among MSM are half of the rate in female sex workers. So, in other words, the MSM are more at risk than female sex workers. They have known how to protect themselves and somehow to protect their business. So, which is not the case for MSM. And the studies in MSM have provided also evidence of the safety and efficacy of the daily PrEP, but there is no study that has been conducted to evaluate PrEP efficacy in transgender people. So let's talk about the HIV virus. The HIV molecular epidemiological patterns in Southeast Asia. This is mostly what we call CRF01 HIV CRF01AE that dominates compared to others, except in China and India, where it is more subtype C, but you will see there are subtle differences. In Malaysia, for example, there is a co-circulation of CRF01A with subtype B that resulted in the emergence of new recombinant forms, circulating recombinant forms that represent now 20% of the HIV infected individuals described in Indonesia. And in the Philippines, there is about 50-50 between CRF01B and AE, and you may want to have some molecular surveillance to see whether there are new recombinants. So this is a graph that shows the different the breakdown of subtypes by region, and you can see what is in green. These circles in green represent CRF01AE, which is for which I said it is still dominant, and in red this is B. So you can see that in Southeast Asia you have also a majority of subtype AE. So this kind of uniform, a more uniform breakdown of circulating recombinant forms. And you can see also the evolution of the circulating recombinant forms over time. These data are being now updated, but you can see that there is a relatively constant and a sustainable epidemic of CRF01AE in Southeast Asia. So some data in some countries that illustrate the fact that the epidemic is mostly in MSM. There was an initial paper in 2013, it was known before, but this 2014 paper illustrated the explosive HIV epidemic among MSM in Bangkok. And there was some projection that was done, and that shows the new HIV infection in Thailand from MSM over time. You can, from different high-risk groups, and you can see that the projection is that MSM, which is the purple bars, is increasing. We are somewhere here, and there is still more to come. So this is really the population at risk now in Thailand. That's another way to illustrate the proportion of new infections in MSM compared to female sex workers. Where in female sex workers, you can see clearly that it dropped, while in MSM it increased. And this, the crossing occurred in around the 2000. Importantly, also it shows that the younger ages are the most affected, and you can see here 23 to 29 years are up. So in terms of incidence, because if you want to do an efficacy trial for HIV vaccine, you need incidence, and you need, as I said before, you need a high incidence. If you have a low incidence, you will end up with a big sample size. So there are different studies ongoing, and that show that the HIV incidence in in MSM and transgender is quite high, in the range of 80%, 8% for MSM and 4.2 for transgender. There are other studies in other areas of Thailand that show also high incidence in the range of 6 to 7%. So these are very high incidences. In Vietnam, just to illustrate that also the estimated prevalence among MSM has increased over the years, so the country doesn't escape this trend. And again, although there is no HIV incidence data available in MSM, the HIV prevalence in the country varies according to the type of studies and the regions. But there are all unpublished reasons to believe that high incidence may also be high in this group. Philippines. So I have seen very interesting data and grateful this morning. Very, very nice data. But the majority, that was from 2015, we're sure that it does not really fundamentally change, but the majority of new HIV infections are among MSM in the Philippines. And here you have, the pie of the different risk groups, and the red is the homo and bisexuals, and from this group you can see that the majority is from the homosexual group, 62.8%. There are some HIV incidents in MSM and transgender as retesters at a clinic in Manila, and the incidents also, there are not real cohorts, longitudinal cohort studies. The incidence is also very high, 6 to 9%, and in particular for the younger MSM, which is really important. China is also same story. In China, you have most of the epidemic is in the southern and central China. You have also an explosion of epidemic in MSM. There has been several HIV incidence studies conducted in MSM across Chinese cities. I gave you the references. The most recent data that are unpublished and embargoed indicate a very high HIV incidence in MSM in the range of 7 to 10% per 100,000 years. And interestingly, that's why I came back to the HIV epidemic that said, in China, CRA418 is also dominating in MSM compared to the non-MSM population, where you have CRA407 BC, which is dominant. But nevertheless, you still have CRA418. And in MSM, this is really the majority. One of the subtype C is, and you have subtype B. So basically, you have the two subtypes that you find in Thailand in this population. So in conclusion, there are considerable progress that has been achieved in reducing HIV epidemic in Asia over the past decade, which is good news. More remains to be done, in particular in key populations such as MSM and transgender, where the highest prevalence and incidence are found. It's particularly true in Asia, but it comes again to light also in Africa. The combination of behavioral and biomedical prevention modalities is the only way to go. Second conclusion, that the RB144 clinical trial vaccine efficacy trial in Thailand paved the way to new efficacy trials in both Africa and Asia. And it also gathers some immune correlates of risk that are helping to design, to improve new vaccines, which is very important. The improvements of the RV144 regimen are ongoing in Thailand and also in South Africa. There are new vaccine approaches such as the F26 and NPA prime boost strategy, where we soon enter efficacy trial in Thailand, EU, Americas, and Africa. So there is, with the background epidemic that I showed you in Asia, there is a unique opportunity to test a vaccine among mostly CRF01, AE infected MSM and transgender women populations in Asia. And that may lead to clinical trials in Thailand, but not only in Thailand, perhaps also in China or Vietnam, or multi-country, possibly multi-country trials. We're not there yet. So there is definitely continuous focusing effort, continuing focusing effort in Thailand. There is a pitfall. I want to highlight that I was talking about PrEP. PrEP is efficacious when it is if you have adherence of the users, and the coming of PrEP that is acceptable, that may overcome the issue of adherence, may change the design of the clinical trials of an HIV vaccine, because if it is really efficacious, you cannot use an HIV vaccine against only a placebo. You may have to use a vaccine and PrEP compared to PrEP only. So this is a more complex design. There have been different modelings and papers written on this type of design. And the other consequence is that if you use PrEP, of course, the HIV incidence will drop, which means that the sample size that you use will be possibly higher as well. So all of this is factored in. Investment efforts and funds in other Asian countries are absolutely needed, and I hope that several countries in Asia will participate in this endeavor. So I would like to thank many people, Dr. Jerome King, Dr. Yuniko, who was the WHO at Wipro before, and my colleagues from WHO in Relay, Fritz von Benson, Lin Chidang in Tsinghua University, Dr. Pham in Vietnam, Paul Kunal and Sani Nazar, with whom we, Joe and I, worked for years in Bangkok. Dr. Fushita in Myanmar, Georgia Damaras, Duke University, Long Ferragini from the WHO Cambodia, the people from the Uganda Institute in Berlin, and our colleagues also from the US Military China Research Program, Professor Michael Bergeron and Professor. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.